Hi guys, I just wanted to come to you and talk to you about the game task knocking down the guard tower, because this is the one that brought on the most conversation during our judges meeting, and it's the one that we've had probably the most questions about since then. I want to make sure that everybody's on the same page, because to me the very worst thing that could happen is we get kids on Saturday morning, they show up, they do something with their robot, they feel like it's legal, turns out it's not legal, they lose all these points, they're very unhappy. Anytime kids don't understand the rules, we have unhappy kids. So please make sure that your kids know those rules backwards and forwards. It's super important. So I wanted to really clarify the rules on this particular task. So the rules on this task state that the robot may not touch either tower. The question becomes, what does that mean by the robot? Okay, what can touch the tower and what can't? All right, so number one, if it is attached or built onto your robot, it can't touch the tower. For example, if I build a battering ram onto the front of my robot and I drive it into the tower, and even if I then somehow deploy a mechanism and make that front part of the robot fall off, it was attached when it knocked down the tower, and therefore that is illegal. Okay? So make sure that whatever is touching the tower is not attached to your robot. Number two, artillery. If you have something like ammunition that you are firing towards, rolling, sending towards, however it might do that, there are lots of ways to make that happen with our robots. That is a very safe way of accomplishing this task, because it will be clear that the item in question has left your robot and then is hitting the tower, and therefore is not part of your robot. Okay, that is a very clear-cut line, and that would be the safest way to approach this task. And then we have a category of weapons called melee weapons. Melee weapons, and I just looked this up, are weapons that operate as an extension of your arm, basically. Okay, so like think a sword. A sword is a melee weapon. Okay, so if my robot goes sword in hand towards the tower and it swings its sword and knocks down the tower, the question is that sword part of the robot? And that question is going to be answered by our judges. So if the judge feels like that weapon is part of your robot, then it will disallow that and you won't get any points. If, however, the judge feels like it's clearly not part of your robot, then you could get points. This is kind of a sketchy area. That's kind of a risky approach to take, because you run the risk of the judge feeling like this item is part of your robot. One thing I will say is there are several items on the table. There are several items that are provided on the field. And in fact, we had originally thought that the ping pong balls would be used as ammunition. Now, if you use anything on the field of play that starts on the field of play that is part of our regular game pieces as ammunition or even as a melee weapon, it clearly could not be considered part of your robot because it started on the field of play. That would be a safer approach to that. So keep that in mind. If you bring your own ammunition or your own melee weapon, your robot would have to start with that on the robot. You're not allowed to bring things and set them on the field in any place. The only thing that you're allowed to bring to the table are your robot and your artifact, and even your artifact has to start on your robot. Okay, so just keep in mind that this is a judge's discretion kind of thing. And if the judge looks at what you have done and they consider that your thing that you use to knock down the tower is part of your robot, then you will not get points. And so that is a risk that you may or may not be willing to take. But I want you to understand that it is a risk, and that doing that could cause you to not earn points for that task. And like I said, the last thing that I want to happen is for you to get there on Saturday morning and to not get points where you think you ought to have gotten them. So if you have any other questions about that, please feel free to email or let us know. I hope that helps clarify some things for you. I know that sometimes when you start to get really creative and you start to really try and skirt those rules, and a lot of people really like to work around the rules. But when you do that, you start to take bigger risks. So as long as you're aware of that, we're all okay. All right. Have a great day.